Welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. Just days after Hurricane Harvey drenched Texas, one of the most tragic events, a Category 5 hurricane named Irma is threatening Florida and the Caribbean islands with sustained winds of 185 miles an hour. They say it is potentially catastrophic. It is considered the worst storm that ever came out of the Atlantic toward the United States. And who knows what's going to happen to Florida. If it goes across Florida, it could be devastating. If it jumps back into the Gulf, which some people are thinking, I just cannot conceive of what could be happening. But they say it may hit the Carolinas. We don't know for sure, but it's one of those things that people had really better do some praying because this thing is a monster. Wendy.
That's so true, Pat. Forecasters are watching Irma closely as it seems virtually certain to hit the U.S. by early next week. Amber Strong has the latest.
Florida residents aren't leaving anything to chance, stocking up on water and supplies and taking the necessary steps to get ready for the extremely high winds expected if Hurricane Irma makes its way ashore there. President Trump has already approved emergency declarations for both Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands for what forecasters are predicting could be the most powerful storm in the history of the Atlantic. The airports on the island of Antigua have shut down with a simple prayer: may God protect us all. And in Florida, Governor Rick Scott has issued a state of emergency for all 67 counties.
Do not sit and wait to prepare. Get prepared now.
Officials in the Florida Keys have also ordered mandatory evacuations.
It's going to be crazy getting out here. It's going to be gridlocked. Getting out of the Keys, there's only one way in and one way out.
Water, batteries, flashlights, the essentials.
I think right now it's a little bit too early to tell, but it's a good time to be prepared.
All this comes as Texans are still cleaning up in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are working to tie emergency funding for disaster aid after Harvey to efforts to raise the debt ceiling. A vote could come as early as today. In the meantime, charities like CBN's Operation Blessing are standing in the gap, with thousands of volunteers helping with the cleanup efforts and working alongside Texans hoping to restore their lives.
The incredible thing is when Operation Blessing volunteers arrive, they go from being incredibly downcast to all of a sudden having hope, all of a sudden knowing that they're not alone.
The OB team says they will continue their work with Texans and are also getting ready for Hurricane Irma as well.
We're praying that that thing somehow turns around and goes out to sea. But if it hits the U.S., Operation Blessing will be there. We'll be in more communities just like we were in the 8 cities here in Texas, loving on people, working with local pastors and churches and emergency management.
Experts are warning wind speeds could reach up to 225 miles per hour before all is said and done. So they're warning people in the way of the storm to take it seriously. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
Thanks, Amber. Ladies and gentlemen, I remember I was down in Florida. I came down after a hurricane known as Andrew hit down there. It had tornado winds inside of the hurricane, 210 miles an hour. The devastation was beyond belief. Whole neighborhoods in southern Florida wiped out. I mean, it was just extraordinary. And this thing has the potential. If it goes across Florida, jumps into the Gulf, my heart breaks for people in New Orleans and people in Texas that would be under the gun of that horrible thing. So please pray. And let me tell you, Operation Blessing is going to be there helping. So we believe in helping what's happening, neighbors helping neighbors, volunteers. Operation Blessing probably is the best organized for mobilizing volunteers of any organization out there. And so you can give if you want to give, but I'm glad that Congress is going to, they're talking about an $8 or $9 billion package, but if Irma hits, that will probably be only a fraction of what's needed. And our great nation has got to come together to help these poor people. But dear me, you think of Puerto Rico, it just went bankrupt. Now they say they may be without power for months.
Wow.
if this thing hits. And Wendy, it breaks your heart to think about what's happening.
It does. I could barely sleep. I was up till about 2 last night. I was just thinking about all those little islands and the people on them and the people that don't have a shelter and those winds. And I was just praying and praying. And it's a monster. We haven't seen, they're saying, like you said, this is the biggest storm we've seen in that part of the world.
Atlantic, it's terrible. But it's something we just need to be praying about, and it breaks your heart. You know, you look at Puerto Rico; they just went bankrupt. They have no money, and yet they say the power may be out for months if this thing hits. They don't have adequate power, and if the utility is destroyed by this hurricane, there's nothing they can do. So anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be there to help if we can. And as a nation, we need to help. Well, in other news, the president did what he should have done because Obama put something into place that he himself said was temporary, the so-called dreamers, wonderful people. And here is the story about that.
That's right, Pat. The program called DACA has protected illegal immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children from being deported. President Obama started the program in 2012 by executive order, but opponents called it an unconstitutional abuse of executive authority. Many in Congress from both parties say a solution to protect the young people, often called dreamers, should be worked out. But passing a compromise measure isn't likely easy to pass. Well, in the wake of the administration's announcement to rescind DACA, President Obama's former press secretary, Josh Earnest, joined CBN's online political talk show, Faith Nation, today to discuss the decision. You can watch that beginning at 12:30 Eastern Time at cbnnews.com. Well, President Trump heads back to the road to push his new tax plan to the public. He holds an afternoon tax reform event with energy sector workers in Bismarck, North Dakota today, and he's bringing along the state's Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp. On Tuesday, the president spoke about his plan to boost the economy here in Washington.
We're going to cut taxes. We're going to reduce taxes for people, for individuals, for middle-income families. We're going to reduce taxes for companies, and those companies are going to produce jobs.
The goal is to make the tax code as simple as possible, provide tax relief for middle-class workers and families, and restore, quote, competitive edge for American businesses. And Pat, the president believes his plan will create millions of new jobs.
But it'll be a tremendous boost. Look, our corporations right now are paying the highest taxes in the world. In the world. You see, you have a federal tax, then you have a state tax, and then many people have a local tax. So you got 3 taxes. And the other companies in other nations just have maybe 1 tax, and those taxes are much lower than ours. So if you look at 35%, then you add on to it, our corporations are at a terrific disadvantage. It's a no-brainer. If you're going to have jobs, you want to have competitive edge, we have to lower the taxes. And the president is right on, and it's nice he's going with Heidi Heitkamp out there in North Dakota. He's got a Democratic senator. He's building support across the spectrum with Democrats and Republicans to get this thing done. They didn't do a good PR job with the health care, and it failed. This time, I think it's going to win.
Maybe they're listening to you. Let's hope so.
They're listening to somebody, all right?